Hey, awesomes. Instructor Corey here with your next video. This one titled, How to Synthesize Your Sources Using Conversation Templates for Literature Reviews. Recall that we've already gone through our literature review. We've talked about how to organize them, right? And now we're talking about synthesis. So once you have your organization down, this is a great opportunity now to synthesize the information. Now we've got the annotated bibliography. You've done an annotated bibliography, I hope. Perhaps you've even mapped out your sources. You've got them now grouped in a way. Now we're going to talk about them together as within each one of those headings, right? So if you've chosen you're going to do chronologically, you're going to take that very, very first event. You're going to take the authors that are talking about whatever it is before that event or after that event, or that particular thematic or topical subheading, right? Whatever that is, right? Recall that we were looking at using bullying, depression, paranoia, right, as psychological reasons, perhaps, right? If your authors are talking about that when it comes to mass school shootings, right? So underneath each one of those, you will now start to talk about these, looking for convergences and divergences between sources and drawing conclusions from those relationships. And that is what's very, very, very important, to put those sources into conversation with one another. Now, you may have already started to do that within your annotated bib, and maybe you haven't, and maybe you struggle with that just a little bit. And this is where conversation templates can really, really, really be beneficial. They help us synthesize information. They give us kind of a platform to begin to enter into a conversation between sources, okay? It's one of the main things we want to do to kind of help us set this up to synthesize information. Is the first thing we want to do is capture the authorial action. What is the author saying? Show the relationship of information between that author and another author. And then we're going to draw conclusions. And that is where the literature review conversation templates really comes into play. We've talked about make sure that you refer to your sources by author and by the year. And then we've got these templates, okay? I've got 3 or 4 pages of X, right? So Jones, 2018, acknowledged that, agreed that, argues, believes. It is really, really important to capture, not just say that so-and-so said, right? Jones said, Jones stated, okay? Well, we know that they did that, but what were they doing in their statement? And I think that's what really sets a good literature review apart, because when you start to capture what the author is doing, you can then put that also, that helps you put it in a conversation with another argue. All right, so if you've got one that is celebrating something, right, and another one that's complaining about something or conceding something, right, or emphasizing something, those are 2 different ways to put text into conversation with one another. First off, get the authorial action. Now we've got these templates that help us kind of think about how do we then put them in conversation with one another, right? So we can say, on the one hand, X, right, Jones 2018 argues this. On the other hand, Smith 2020 contends blank. This demonstrates that, or the blank, right? So you got one saying, you got a source saying something, another source saying something, and now what does that mean, right? How does that make a conversation? What are they talking about? They're different? How does one arguing something and one contending something in that conversational moment apply, right? What's the significance? Now, notice a few of these are highlighted. Some of these are highlighted because in the example at the bottom here, these are some that I used. I use these conversation templates all the time. I've got a dissertation paragraph that I'm going to show you here in a minute. So Jones's 2018 theory of blank is extremely useful because it sheds light on the difficult problem of whatever the topic is. Whereas, okay, now we're going to bring in another author, right? So now this is how we're putting them in conversation with one another. Whereas Smith's 2020 theory states blank, and therefore by one author stating this one thing, on the shedding light on the problem in this way, and this one here saying that he says this or she says that, it means this. It's signifying what, okay? Another part of synthesizing information is to clarify the author's ideas, right, or concepts. So if you bring in an author, and let's say it's a difficult concept, and it gives you an opportunity to then explicate a little bit about what the author is saying. In other words, or that is, those are 2 I use quite frequently. And then also we have conclusion, right? This is where we draw in conclusion, right? So we're talking about our authors, we're putting them in conversation with one another, and then we also want to draw conclusions about what our authors are saying, right? Because it's not just that they're saying, because we're entering the conversation, recall, okay? My own view, right? So I've got these authors saying that. Don't forget to interject your conclusion, right? So a good way to help you do that is to say, my own view is what blank, 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 blank states is, insist is a blank is in fact a blank. And I use this one. This is one of my most favorite ones I ever used. All right. So you can look over those. You can modify a lot of these too, right? You don't have to use them necessarily verbatim, but they provide a scaffolding that you can then insert and then begin to play with them. Okay. Now I don't expect you to use them. You're not going to use them necessarily perfectly right out the gate when you start playing with these and using these, but give yourself time. They're extremely helpful. All right. So here's a literature review example. Like I said, from my dissertation, this particular subsection of my literature review is talking about writing about culture from the anthropological approach, right? So this is going to then kind of give us an indication of how I organized, right? I did it, how we're writing about things and by particular approaches, okay? So I start out, one of the issues is, here's my issue that we're talking about. Here is my first author, right? Here's this main thing that he's setting up this problem, right? In other words, so I'm now explicating, right? I'm explaining what that author is saying, all right? He urges us to do it this way, okay? So I'm setting up what he's done. Now I'm going to start bringing in other authors. Okay. According to Holloway, it's this. This clarity has important consequences for the broader domain of ethnographic research, right? Or anthropological research, okay? Ethnography being the primary research methodology. Anyway, this clarity is important because that is, right? I'm explaining is extremely useful because it sheds light on the problem of blank, whereas Clifford, okay, so now we've got that, remember that template, right? Here it says, here's the topic. He's talking about this thing called thick description. It's extremely useful because it sheds light on the problem of ethnographic research, whereas Clifford insinuates that researchers are pressured to do that if they do not conform to the Western traditions of research methodologies. Seems to elevate concerns, right? So now I'm starting to put these things into conversation and go a little bit deeper into what he's saying, okay? Therefore implying that researchers expose a culture's non-Western tradition. So, right, so I'm done with, I got my authors set up. Here's what they're talking about. Now, here come my words. Here's what I'm saying about it, right? In between these, using the template in those blanks that the template provide to give me an opportunity to now to start interject. So, because those blanks is where I'm entering the conversation, okay? Certain blanks I'm putting in what they're saying. Now it's time for me to put in what I'm saying, okay? Geertz and Clifford insist, excuse me, my own view is that what both Geertz and Clifford insist is an issue within ethnographical research is, in fact, recall this from a template above there, equal to anthropological genocide. So in essence, I've drawn a conclusion, put these two, actually three authors into conversation with one another. So I used this author here to clarify what he's talking about, okay? And then I brought back in the problem, put them back together, and drew my own conclusion. These templates are taken from the They Say, I Say series. So if you want to look for more of these are just a few of them that I've copied and pasted in here for you. There are a ton more. These are the particular ones I use quite frequently and I find most helpful. So thank you to the They Say, I Say authors. So I hope that will be helpful. All right, guys, have fun writing your literature review. Synthesize that information. Use these templates. I use them all the time. They are so helpful. All right. Happy literature reviewing, synthesizing, conversation template using. All right.